Hey VC, I'm here to do a classical and jazz update for y'all on stuff I picked up this past month, but also stuff that just because of shipping costs I had shipped to my family's house in Austin, so this is not all stuff I purchased in the last month. This is accumulation of a couple months, at least since January. Yeah, dive in. About 50-50 jazz and classical. I guess I'll start with the jazz, with a kind of a wild card for me, because I'm not normally a Sinatra fan, but I got the MoFi reissue of Sinatra's Where Are You in mono. I picked this up because this is probably Sinatra's most lush album with orchestral arrangements, and supposed to be incredibly well recorded for the time. And to me, this is the only Sinatra album I really like. I've tried listening to many of his full-length albums, and this is the only one that really spoke to me. So I figured if I should own one Sinatra album, I should probably own this one, because I think the orchestral arrangements in that one are just absolutely beautiful. All right, moving on to actual serious jazz. Finally got the Analog Productions reissue of Duke Ellington and John Coltrane on double 45. Sorry, the glare is really bad. Anyway, this is on double 45. I got this based off of a recommendation from, not directly, but a recommendation in one of Barack P. Dub's videos talking about this album, and I went and listened to it and really liked it. So this is the new Music Matters 33 edition of the Magnificent Thad Jones. Really, really awesome trumpet player. I believe this was recorded in the 50s, so it's a little more old school, based more on bop and post-bop than any avant-garde stuff that was coming out in the 60s. This is also more of an old school bop album. This is Kenny Drew's Undercurrent, also Music Matters 33. Trying to get these before they're all gone. I have a couple albums by Jackie McLean. I just wanted to add one more to my collection. This is the double 45 of One Step Beyond, also on Music Matters. This is one I've been meaning to pick up for a long time because I do really love Lee Morgan, and I have quite a few of his albums. This is Lee Morgan, The Procrastinator, Blue Note double 45. This was an album that was never released after. It was recorded and not released for like 10 or 15 years. It was recorded in the late 60s at the height of Morgan's prowess, and then just never released, I think, until the late 70s. And the last one is an oldie but a goodie. This is Horace Silver and the Jazz Messengers. Again, Music Matters. So that does it for the jazz. On to the classical, which is a little more varied and a little more interesting. I pretty much just only bought Music Matters this time around. So this is a really special record for me. This is Highlights from The Barber of Seville with Maria Callas singing. And what makes this record so special is that it is my first Columbia Silver and Blue label. Those of you that have watched my classical video know that this label is one of the most sought after labels, and I finally have one. I will show you. That is what an early Columbia SAX stereo label looks like. These are super rare, especially in good condition. Some of them fetch thousands of dollars. This one does not. This was somewhat affordable, but they are still quite rare, quite sought after, and they're supposed to have really interesting sound. I haven't listened to it yet. I've just had a backlog of stuff I needed to listen to, and I've been really busy in the last couple weeks. But I'm really excited because I do like this opera, and I love Maria Callas, and I'm excited to see if this label lives up to all the hype. Here I got some Everest reissues from backstock that Acoustic Sounds had of the old classic records Everest reissues. Got one up here from one of my favorite composers. This is Sargent conducting London in Shostakovich Symphony No. 9. And also, on the other side, they do Prokofiev Lieutenant Kiji. Here's one of my favorite conductors conducting the Houston Symphony Orchestra in Bartók Concerto for Orchestra. Same deal, classic records reissue of the Everest catalog. And finally, one of my favorite piano concertos, a concerto that I was lucky enough to be able to play this past fall. Not play on piano, play on oboe. This is the Khachaturian Piano Concerto. Hugo Rheingold conducting London Symphony Orchestra, and the pianist is Peter Catton. Not a pianist I'm terribly familiar with, but Everest never had the giant artist. Everest mostly just had the really interesting sound and performances. Got some living stereos here. This is one that I did not think I was going to find. This is a pretty rare living stereo. This is Jean Casadesus playing Book 1 of the Debussy Preludes. This is a really tough to find living stereo. You will not see it all the time on eBay. I think on eBay, if you check the sold listings, I think one sells once a year. I think there's one up there once a year usually. It doesn't sell for big money. It's just hard to find. So I was very interested in it. And this is of course a shaded dog. Unfortunately, I took a gamble because, you know, eBay is always a gamble, and this was a little worse for wear. It's not in horrible condition, but it definitely wasn't in near mint condition like the seller described. So I'm gonna listen to it and see how it does. But you know, I only paid like $10 for this, and it's such a rare living stereo that I kind of want to just hang on to it anyway. So, you know, sometimes that happens in collecting. I got some Analog Productions reissues of Living Stereo. These are the next two that they put out in the series. This is, I cannot pronounce this name, Charles Mackerras, I think that's correct, conducting London Prom Symphony in a bunch of different music from Sibelius and Grieg, including the famous Finlandia. This is probably the best recording of Finlandia, I think. Sorry again about the glare. I should take these out of the sleeves. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And then we have the Reiner recording with Vienna. One of the only... There's only like 2 or 3 recordings that Reiner did with Vienna, to my knowledge, in the stereo era, of Strauss's Till Eulenspiegel and also Death and Transfiguration. Coming up, we have an EMI Testament reissue of a very interesting recording. This is Sir Thomas Beecham conducting the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra in Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade. So this is probably my 2nd or 3rd EMI Testament reissue. They do a pretty good job with them. You know, there's not the quality of Analog Productions, but for being an in-house label, they do a pretty good job, and I believe these are all analog to the best of my knowledge. That's what they say. But, you know, trusting someone that's selling something to you is always a dicey matter. This recording is really interesting, though. It's different from a lot of Scheherazade recordings because Beecham was known as kind of a wild card conductor. He definitely... I don't know if he would survive in the modern orchestral world, but back then he had quite a bit of fun from what I hear, and he would give a great amount of freedom to the orchestra. Freedom to really do their own thing, and it shows because the cadenzas in this recording of Scheherazade are more adventurous and more varied than I think any other recording I've heard. He really gives the soloists complete freedom, rhythmic and musical. This is definitely not the way they would play it nowadays, but I think it's still a really great interpretation, and it shows it really does show just how varied the interpretations of conductors were back in this era. Something we've unfortunately lost nowadays. Oh, how did I get in here? I got an epic pressing of George Zell conducting Don Juan and Death and Transfiguration, also Till Eulenspiegel. Again, I talked about this in my last video a little bit, but you know, Epic with Zell, any Zell recording from this era is going to have pretty mediocre to poor sound quality. But I really like the performances of the Cleveland Orchestra, and I really enjoy listening to Mark Lifshee, the oboist, play the solo in Don Juan. Mark Lifshee was a great, great oboist that played under Zell. And yeah, I think this was worth picking up for the performance alone, and I paid like nothing for it. Okay, moving on. I've got a direct-to-disc recording here. I talked a little bit about in one of my previous videos recordings from Chasing the Dragon Records. This is Interpreti Veneziani, I think I pronounced that correctly, playing Vivaldi's Four Seasons, and this is a direct-to-disc recording. I talked a lot about direct-to-disc in the Brahms video, so I'm not going to do that here. This sounds outstanding. I can't wait to see what this label has in store, because they are currently making records now. They've got another record that's, I think, like Bizet and other Spanish-influenced music that they're releasing very soon, if not already out. So I can't really wait to see what this record label comes out with next. Oh, I missed Analog Productions Living Stereo. This is the big one. This is the one everyone's been screaming about. This is the one where originals sell for thousands of dollars. This is the Royal Ballet Gala performances with Ernst Ansermet. This is one I really recommend picking up if you're into classical at all, because I have a feeling in a couple months it's going to be sold out, and you really can't get a copy of this on the used market. The other two pressings that have come out before this, Classic Records did one, and then the original, of course, the original Living Stereo. Both the original Living Stereo and the Classic Records pressing of this record were fetching at least $600 on eBay before this came out. So get this while you can, because I have no doubt that once this is out of print, its prices are going to do the same thing. Another Shostakovich recording in the mix. This is the very, very famous recording of Baba Yar with Andrei Previn. Symphony No. 13 was Shostakovich's probably most controversial symphony, because it contained poems, it contained sung text by the poet that I am not going to try to pronounce, but you read it there. Not going to try to pronounce that. But yeah, the poetry in this symphony, from what I've read some of it actually, the English translation, and it's talking about the plight of the Soviet and Polish Jews, first under the Nazis and then various hardships they faced directly after World War II, and the relationship in the Soviet Union between the Jews of Eastern Europe and the Soviet government was always kind of strange, because on the one hand they rescued them from the Nazis, and on the other hand they never really treated them that well either. So it was a touchy subject in Russia, and even though this was written after Stalin had died, so Shostakovich had a lot more freedom, this was still, he was treading on delicate waters here. The Yevgeny Mavrinsky, which is the conductor that premiered all of Shostakovich's symphonies from No. 5 up until 13, declined to premiere this. And I think the reason he declined to premiere this is because he was afraid he would get in trouble. Luckily, he didn't really get in trouble. There was some censorship, I believe, of early performances, but nothing major. And he was able to put this symphony into the canon. But this would definitely not have been written or performed under Stalin. Shostakovich would have probably been either jailed or executed or disappeared for writing this symphony during the time of Stalin. And while we're talking about Shostakovich, I have some more Shostakovich. This is a great recording on Columbia 6i. I will take it out. On the Columbia 6i label of Rostropovich, premiering on record the first cello concerto, not premiering, but making the first recording of Shostakovich's first cello concerto. And this is, of course, on Columbia 6i. But I mainly like this recording because it has an excellent recording of Shostakovich's first symphony, which is a very underrated symphony in my opinion, and has a great oboe solo in it, played here by the Philadelphia Orchestra. So the oboist at this time was John Delancey. Very, very well-known oboist and pedagogue. Got another Columbia 6i. This one was actually sealed when I bought it. Of course, I've taken it out of the seal because I play my records, but 6i never been played. This is the Philadelphia Orchestra playing Rachmaninoff's Symphonic Dances. Another one that I bought sealed, and one that I'm very excited about because it is an oboe piece for sure, and that is the Philadelphia Orchestra playing some showpieces by Ravel. The big one on here is Bolero, but that's not the one I care about. The one I care about is both Alborada del Gracioso and La Tomba de Couperin, which is basically a concerto disguised as a symphonic work. This is the Philadelphia Orchestra, again playing Bolero, but also La Valse, Pavane for a Dead Princess, the Hébert à Scales, Debussy Clair de Lune, so lots of little French showpieces that are all very much in the repertoire today. And finally, to round out the video, I have some really nice Decca SXLs from the wideband. I believe these are all wideband. First, I have highlights from Der Rosenkavalier, one of my favorite operas. This is kind of one that I hadn't really heard of before, but it does have Regine Crespin in it. This isn't the most famous recording of Rosenkavalier by far, but I wanted to check it out and see what it was like. We have a couple Dvorak recordings from the cycle that Esteban Cortez did with the London Symphony. So we have Symphony No. 5, Symphony No. 6, and Symphony No. 7, which is my favorite Dvorak symphony. And finally, the last record I have to show you today is a nice wideband Decca copy of highlights from Rossini's Italian in Algiers. It's a very early Decca. So that's it. That's all I got to show you. We went through a lot of records, and I've listened to some of them, haven't gotten to listen to all of them yet, and I'm excited to spend the rest of my summer doing just that. So cheers, VC. Happy listening.